The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 20. It will be enacted as it narrated. As Jesus was telling what the kingdom of heaven would be like, he said, "Early one morning, a man went out to hire some workers for his vineyard. After the conversation, he agreed to pay them a usual amount for a day's work. He sent them off to his vineyard. About 9 that morning, the man saw some other people standing at the marketplace with nothing being done. He said he would pay them for what was fair if they would work in this vineyard. So he went. At midday, again, about 3 in the afternoon, he returned to the marketplace. Some people still loafing around, and he asked them to come to work in his vineyard. Finally, about 5 in the afternoon, a man went back and found some others standing in the marketplace. Asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" So all came to the farm or the vineyard and at work. He also told the men that he will be able to give them their pay. The workers who had been hired in the vineyard.
But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more, and they likewise received every man a penny. And when they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house. Saying, "These last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them and said, "Friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst now thou agree with me for a penny? Take that thine ease and go thy way. I will give unto this last even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with my own? Is thine eye evil because I am good?"
Jesus then said, "So it is, everyone who is now first will be last, and everyone who is last will be first." These ends our Bible reading.
Before she goes on to the pulpit, I just want to introduce our speaker this morning. She is Mrs. Jino. She's the president of the South Pacific Area Women's Fellowship. And with her, we have Miss Ilisiane from Tonga. She's the vice president of the Women's Fellowship of the Pacific area. They're actually here to come and cite and also to work with the local arrangement committee for our 2018 South Pacific Area Seminar, which will be held at the Vision Hotel, and the Indian Division has 10 places for that. And so we welcome them, and we trust that her message will be a blessing to us as we got it from us this morning. Inaka, Joy.
Thank you. Let us pray. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord. Amen. The theme that I would like to share with us this morning as we celebrate together the World Day of Prayer prepared by our sisters from the Philippines is God is not being unfair to you. God is not being unfair to you. Oh, God is not being unfair to me. As we look around us, we feel unfairness rules the world. We read injustice and unfairness everywhere. We see people who already have more are having more, and people who have less are having less. When we do more than others and are getting less than others for what we do, we feel we are unfairly treated. This is the case in the story in Matthew 20, verses 1 to 16. The people who work the full day and who bear the heat of the day are given the same pay as those people who work just an hour. Those who work the full day reap the vineyard do so not by agreement are the Gentile believers, and the pay they receive is solely based on the grace and generosity of God. God is not being unfair when He gives the same grace to the Gentiles believers that He also gives to the Jewish believers. God is not being unfair when He saves the Gentile believers just as He saves the Jewish believers. All that can be said is, to the Jews, God is faithful in keeping His laws and promises. To the Gentiles, God is gracious and generous. In light of this story, friends, we may now comment on the questions for the 2017 World Day of Prayer theme. Am I being unfair to you? In this world where unfairness seems to rule the world and the structures that govern people seem to be fraught with unfairness and injustice, we need to be very sure of these three fundamental points about God. First, God is not being unfair to anyone. Second, God is faithful to His promise. Third, God is being very generous with anyone. He's being very generous with everyone. This is where we Christians find our basis for addressing issues of unfairness and injustice in this world. God is just, God is faithful, and God is generous. Convinced that God is just, faithful, and generous, we can begin by praying that the kingdom of heaven will rule here on earth. Armed with this conviction about who God is, we can do what is practically possible so that our society may practice justice, faithfulness, and generosity. As we seek to establish God's justice, God's faithfulness, and God's generosity, as we learn from the story about the workers in the vineyard, we may in turn establish justice, faithfulness, and generosity amongst ourselves as God's workers in this world. To God be the glory.